My conservative parents leave my brother as the sole heir because they hate my husband, but when they come back because I'm pregnant, I ask them about my brother's husband. I'm a 31-year-old woman and the eldest daughter of a family that's relatively well known around here. They're not old money rich or anything like the Vanderbilts, but they are on a high social level. They've always been exactly as you'd imagine. Conservative traditional types who believe their children's worth is measured by how good they make the family look. Everything they did was for the legacy. I can't tell you how much I hate that word. Looking back, it's almost cartoonish how much they cared about ensuring I didn't bring shame to the family. At the time, living in that situation, I didn't have the perspective I have now. All I cared about was making sure I was perfect in everything that mattered to them. Perfect grades, perfect appearance, perfect posture, perfect hobbies, perfect friends, perfect school. It didn't matter what I wanted because, above all else, I wanted to be perfect for them. I didn't want to disappoint them. Somehow, though, I always did. Maybe I ate too much. Slouched when I should have had impeccable posture or was too loud and drew too much attention at any family event. God forbid I got a grade that wasn't perfect. Their standards were something no one could meet, but I tried anyway. I kept trying no matter the cost. Friends, sleep, sanity. God, more than anything, I wanted to make them proud, to be their perfect daughter. With my brother, it was different. Now I know it's not uncommon, after reading many stories similar to mine for parents, especially mothers to favor the younger sibling. But back then, like in everything else, I lacked perspective. I just saw that I was working so hard while he didn't have to do anything. Gabriel, my brother, is 2 years younger than me. Many younger siblings look up to their older ones, and Gabriel did for a while, but he realized pretty quickly that his tears meant far more to our mom than mine ever could. His wants always came before mine. I had to work hard to be perfect while he was born flawless in our parents' eyes. Gabriel figured this out shockingly fast. Faster than I gave him credit for, really. I was the slow learner in that regard. I kept hoping that if I were just good enough, if my grades were a bit better, if I were a bit more polished, if I achieved a bit more, some switch would flip in my parents' heads, and they'd love me the way they loved Gabriel. I mean, it never happened, and the chance of it happening shattered when I was 17. And they found out, well, that I liked both boys and girls. I wasn't the one who told them. It wasn't something I even talked about openly. I wasn't ashamed of it. Not really. Despite how my family was, I grew up in this century, and my parents had never explicitly talked about the topic, so it wasn't something I felt ashamed of. Even so, I knew they wouldn't feel the same, and that's why I swore to never tell anyone or act on any feelings I had for someone of the same gender. I didn't tell anyone, I just kept it between the pages of my journal and me. But, wow, when they found out, their reaction was worse than I could have ever imagined. I had hidden it, thinking they'd disapprove and be disappointed, but that it wouldn't go beyond that. Sure, the thought of their disappointment was already a big enough deterrent to keep it a secret. I was right to some extent. They were disappointed and disapproved, but they also nearly threw me out of the house right then and there. I was 17, just starting my final year of high school. My whole life was ahead of me, doing exactly what would make them proud. At that moment, it felt like my world was falling apart, and it completely blindsided me. But I'd spent years trying to be the perfect daughter, and I wasn't willing to let them down, not them and not myself. I managed to talk to them, and convince them that I'd never act on it, that I'd never do anything to bring them shame. I was on thin ice, but I wasn't out on the street. The next year, I spent rebuilding their trust in me. When I graduated from university with offers from the best firms in the city, I thought I had finally done it. At that point, they started introducing me to eligible young men, and my own mother told me they couldn't trust me not to run off with some silly girl. The implication hurt, but I still tried to please them. I met the men they tried to set me up with, and then I met Hugo. If you know the "I can fix her" meme, I think that's what Hugo thought when he met me. He saw all the wrong beliefs instilled in me and thought, yes, she's the one. I met him while having a bracelet of my grandmother's adjusted to fit me. He's a jeweler. It wasn't exactly love at first sight, but it was something. He taught me that love doesn't have to be demanding and that I don't have to exhaust myself to be worthy of the love my parents wanted from me. He gave me the perspective I never had in my closed-off world, which was entirely devoted to pleasing my parents. I knew he was the man I wanted. I'm going to marry him, I thought. I believed that maybe my parents would see how happy he made me, happier than I'd ever been, and that, probably, I don't know, they might look past the fact that his background didn't match the men they'd tried to set me up with. Instead, they disinherited me, leaving everything to Gabriel, and told me that if I wanted to mix with the plebs, then I wasn't their daughter. It broke me. It really broke me. Being with Hugo had given me some perspective, but much of me was still that little girl yearning for her mom and dad's approval. I didn't know who I was without it, but it's been 5 years, and I've had time to figure that out. Yes, it hurt, but being disinherited was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm no longer the girl trying to achieve a perfection I could never reach. I mean, I'm human. Hugo helped me realize that, along with a very good therapist. Now that I've finally moved on, my parents are trying to worm their way back into my life as if they never threw me out of theirs. I know exactly why. They found out I'm pregnant. They probably heard it through some family friend or an uncle or aunt who hasn't been cut off yet. And, honestly, I don't care how they found out. I just know I don't want them here. Yesterday, they sent me a letter. Yes, a letter. I'm surprised it wasn't delivered by a pigeon. It was an invitation to a gala hosted by my father's company with an attached note saying they'd love to see me after so long. No mention of disinheriting me. No apology. No acknowledgement that we've been somewhat estranged for the past 5 years. Frankly, I'm furious, which I think is a sign of how much I've grown. Before, I would never have allowed myself to be angry at them, but now I am. I don't want to respond. I want to burn the letter and move on with my life. But if there's one thing I know about them, it's that they'll just send another. If they've decided they want to see me, they'll persist until they do. I want to know how I can respond to cut this off before it goes any further. So I turn to you, people of the internet. I know for a fact that half of you thrive on drama and have probably read about or lived in families worse than mine. Give me a plan of action. Update 1. I asked for a plan of action, and boy did I get plenty. Some were more nonsensical than others, and a few were outright wild, bordering on criminal or flat-out illegal. I've never posted much online before, so I didn't really understand those posts about weird private messages. But, wow, I wasn't prepared for the amount of craziness that flooded my inbox after my post. Some of you are angels, and some of you really shouldn't have access to the internet. Sorry, I got sidetracked. Okay, the plan. What I decided on was a mix of suggestions from the comments and messages, as well as what Hugo and I felt was a reasonable course of action to start with, and, hopefully, finish. I reached out to Gabriel. Given what I mentioned about him in my original post, I imagine some of you might be confused or disagree with my choice, but I thought it was the easiest way to address the situation and, hopefully, put a stop to it before it escalated. It wasn't a decision I made lightly. I didn't mention this in my first post, but Gabriel is the one who outed me to our parents. He was 15 at the time, and I guess he found my journal at some point because he had photos of the relevant entries which he showed to our parents. He was mad at me for turning down a date with an older boy from his sports team and claimed I was making him look bad because I was his sister. So he went digging for something he could use against me. He told our parents about me, how I liked both men and women, saying that's why I had rejected the date. But the reality was, I was just too focused on my studies to have time for dating anyone. Yeah, well, that's how everything went down. But he was 15 then. And while I believed he had it easier than I did, he also grew up in that house. I've changed a lot since I left, and I heard he's now living in the UK. So maybe the distance has changed him a bit too. I didn't have his number, but I found him on Instagram through some mutual acquaintances and messaged him there. He opened it. I know because he accepted the message request, and I can see that he read it, but he didn't reply. Speaking of not replying, my parents have leveled up their attempts by sending gifts. Since I didn't respond to their letter from 2 weeks ago, they've somehow interpreted that as an invitation to start sending packages. Currently there are 3 parcels of varying sizes sitting in my laundry room. I won't open them, though I did peek at the attached notes. Same as always, they'd love to see me soon. Hope I'm doing well, and this time, even a congratulations on the pregnancy. I'll wait a few more days to see if Gabriel responds. If he doesn't, I guess I'll have to come up with a new plan of action. Update 2. Well, yes, in a very surprising twist of events that makes me extremely grateful for creating a throwaway account and using fake names, folks. Gabriel has a boyfriend. Yes. Let me explain how we got here. Hugo and I were invited to my cousin's birthday celebration. I've distanced myself from most of my family after everything that happened, but many of my cousins on my mom's side reached out, and we've reconnected since then. Some relationships are still a bit shaky, but they're there and improving. When Hugo and I were invited, we were assured my parents wouldn't be present. Sure enough, a little over an hour into the party, they showed up. I wanted to leave immediately, but some of my cousins pulled me inside the house, away from them. We ended up crammed in my younger cousin's room until the coast was clear enough to leave without my parents seeing us. But naturally, when you put several people in a room, gossip inevitably starts, and that's how we found out about Gabriel. Some of my cousins are still in contact with him, though they say he's practically vanished for everyone since moving to the UK. One of them mentioned that they were checking his Instagram one day, hoping to see if he posted anything new. He hadn't, but they checked the photos he'd been tagged in, and that's where it got interesting. There was a tagged photo that disappeared barely 5 minutes later. Luckily, my cousin clicked on the profile before the tag was removed. They showed me the profile of the man in the photo. His name is Bo. Clearly, Bo is some kind of model or influencer. He posts a lot, sometimes twice a day, documenting his life in the UK. And based on many of his posts and captions, Bo is married to Gabriel. I'll give you a moment to process that. I needed several moments. I was completely frozen. I didn't know what to think. It was like my brain short-circuited. Gabriel, the boy who outed me to our parents and even used slurs he probably didn't even understand, has a husband. He's living on a completely different continent, married to a man. I think I finally understand why he hasn't responded. I contacted him through Instagram, the same place where our cousins stumbled across his little secret. He's probably worried I found out or already knew. He's probably just as scared as I was when our parents found out about me. Just as scared as I was at the idea of anyone discovering my relationship. Don't get me wrong, I'm still completely shocked by this revelation. But I think maybe, just maybe, what I hoped would happen by being away from home and giving Gabriel some space really has happened. Maybe the distance has given him the time and space to figure out who he really is. I'll update you when I have more news. Update 3. In light of what I discovered just 3 days ago, I decided to try contacting Gabriel again. He'd accepted my message request. So even though he didn't reply before, I wasn't limited to just one message. I wrote and rewrote what I wanted to say several times, but in the end, I opted to tell him I was just looking for some support in getting our parents to leave me alone. I didn't congratulate him on his marriage or mention it because I knew how vulnerable that might make him feel. Well, this time he responded, and as some of you predicted, it wasn't kind. His reply was harsh. He told me he had absolutely no obligation to support me and that I should be grateful our parents were even trying to contact me, especially since they wanted to be part of their grandchild's life. He added some nasty comments saying they thought I'd never give them a grandchild because I was a insert disgusting slur here. He also said, I should thank them for being willing to overlook the fact that I married a nobody from a backward country. First of all, for context, Hugo's family is Argentine. His parents moved here right before he was born, so he's American by birth but incredibly proud of his roots and heritage as he should be. This was something my parents held against me when I told them about him. In addition to not coming from a respectable family in their eyes, his parents were immigrants. My parents' attitude toward Hugo and his family was one of the reasons I was finally able to break away from them. Gabriel, at that time, repeated what my parents said. But I thought that maybe, with the distance and the fact that he was married to a man, he had finally left our parents' opinions behind. Clearly, that was just a naive wish. Gabriel reaffirmed everything our parents had said back then. Somehow, despite the life he's living now, he was still spouting racism and the same nonsense our parents had instilled in him. I was very close to confronting him at that moment through Instagram messages, throwing everything I'd discovered about him right in his face. I wanted to tear him apart for what he was saying about me, about my husband, and about his family. Those nobodies from a backward country who took me in as one of their own when I was disowned. These are the people I now consider more family than the ones who brought me into the world. But I knew that arguing with him wouldn't get me anywhere. His vile words actually gave me permission to do what I might otherwise have convinced myself not to do. He gave me the final move in my plan of action, and I wasn't going to waste my breath on him. So I'll tell you more once I put it into action. Update 4. With my plan ready, I was prepared when my parents showed up at my door. I wasn't expecting them to come at that moment, but I did know we'd eventually cross paths at some family event given how determined they were to see me. I didn't expect them to just show up at my door, but you know what? I was ready. It was the first time in 5 years I'd seen my parents face to face. A lot had changed. I was no longer that lost girl seeking their approval and hoping they'd like the man I loved. Now, I was older, more confident, married, and pregnant with a child I planned to raise much better than they raised me. My mother tried to hug me, but I didn't let her. Her fake sweet smile disappeared for a second, but clearly, they were determined. I asked them what they were doing at my door, and my father said they'd come to share the good news. They were so excited to be grandparents, to meet their little bundle of joy who would continue the family legacy. They asked if I would invite them in, and I asked why they would want to come into the home I share with my husband, the man they disapproved of so much they disowned me from marrying him. My mother said they weren't there to talk about old issues, that they were willing to let it go, as if they were granting me some kind of forgiveness. They wanted to talk about the future, about the new members of the family who would soon arrive. I responded that they hated the father of my child. Apparently, hate was too strong a word. My father said he could even grow to like my husband for the baby's sake, of course. Well, you remember the plan, right? It wasn't so much a plan as a bomb I was waiting to detonate. My parents said they were willing to grow to like my husband. Well, tough luck for them because we weren't willing to put up with their nonsense for even one more second. So I told them I hoped they liked Gabriel's husband more as he'd be the only son-in-law they'd have, and then I slammed the door in their faces. As someone who wasn't even allowed to slam a door while growing up, let me tell you, it was incredibly satisfying. Did I just out my brother? Yes, I did. Did I ignore all the frantic knocking from my parents during the half hour they spent outside my door demanding answers? Also, yes. And no. I don't care about the morality of it. And I still don't. I was planning to leave it there. Buried, done, and move on with my life. But then Gabriel started sending me messages full of more and more verbal abuse. That's when I made another decision. I took screenshots of every message he sent, every nasty word, and I posted everything on Instagram. I tagged his husband, Bo. At some point, I'd wanted to contact Bo directly, but his account didn't allow messages from random accounts. This was the best I could do. It took 8 hours for one of Bo's followers to see my post. Shortly after that, the comments started pouring in. Bo posted an Instagram story saying he was more than shocked and horrified by the messages revealed between his husband and his sister-in-law, and that he would be taking time off social media to process and deal with the situation. Guys, if his eccentric profile is any indication of how he might react, I don't think he's going to take it well that his husband spewed all that rhetoric, especially after discovering Gabriel outed me, which I also included in the long description of my post. Honestly, I don't think I'll post another update after this. I feel like I've said what I needed to say. I know my decision on how to handle all this will raise some eyebrows, but for those who helped me get here, thank you. Update 5. After my last update, I really expected to be torn apart. I knew what I did would be controversial, especially on the internet, and that many people wouldn't agree with my decisions, particularly with the Instagram post. The moment I posted the update, I logged out of this account and made sure I wouldn't get any email notifications. However, I was pleasantly surprised to see a fair amount of support when I logged back in later. I didn't expect anyone to support the evil sister who outed her brother, but here we are. I guess we all have a bit of wickedness in our hearts, right? I think both sides will want to know why I logged back in. Bo messaged me directly, completely out of the blue, unprovoked and totally unexpected. But when I read what he wrote, it wasn't hostile. To summarize, here's the gist. After I made the post, one of Bo's followers found it. Pretty much everyone who followed or knew him started pressuring him to leave Gabriel. According to Bo, it was pretty intense. Obviously, he took the whole situation very seriously, but was also conflicted about just leaving the man he loved. I don't blame him for that. This really hit him like a ton of bricks. He was angry, hurt, and confused, and it was all happening while his followers were demanding blood. Still, he knew he had to do something. So he gave Gabriel an ultimatum: either renounce the inheritance and cut ties with his parents, or Bo would leave him. Gabriel chose his inheritance. That broke Bo's heart, and, obviously, he wasn't going to stay with a man who chose money and an idiotic family over him. Now here comes the part that's going to anger half of you, and the rest will probably find it incredibly satisfying. My parents disinherited Gabriel anyway. They claimed it was because he hid such a big secret from them and that their trust in him was shattered. But we all know the truth. It's because they're bigots and don't approve of his lifestyle. Either way, Gabriel is now without his precious inheritance and in the process of getting a divorce. For those wondering, no, I haven't let my parents back into my life. Since the last update, they've tried. I have no doubt they'll keep trying, but I don't care. I have my family, and they are not a part of it. They can find an heir and grandchildren elsewhere. Update 6. If you're here reading this new update, it's because although I thought everything was over, the repercussions of what happened with my family continued to echo like an endless drama. I've learned a lot from my cousins, and other things I've seen because they've gone public. So if you're ready to follow along with this chaos, I hope you're in the mood to read because this is what's been happening. To start with, Gabriel's relationship is no longer a secret. Friends, family, acquaintances of my parents, everyone knows. In a normal world, this wouldn't be a problem. It'd be something most people would find irrelevant. The kind of thing where someone might say, "Oh, did you hear who came out recently? Oh, that's nice. Pass me the butter." But in my parents' world, it's worse than any domestic tragedy you could imagine. Worse than stubbing your pinky toe on the edge of the bed. They, with their archaic and traditionalist views, can't process it for what it is, an opportunity to change, evolve, and show tolerance. Instead, as expected, they're devastated because their small, conservative, pristine world has been shaken, and now the people, their golf buddies, business partners, and the entirety of their elite social circle know the truth. A truth they would have preferred to keep buried in the darkest corners. My cousins told me that Gabriel, after being disinherited, tried to reach out to them. I guess in his desperation, he thought there might be reconciliation or more likely that he could reclaim his inheritance. But as expected, my parents rejected him without hesitation. The rumor within the family is that they don't want someone like him. And I won't repeat the exact homophobic slur they've used to take over the family business or the fortune. They don't care that Gabriel is their son. For them, what matters is the image, the surname, and above all, maintaining their facade of conservative perfection. And here's where things get really interesting. Gabriel, after being